The Trouble with Eastern, fanfic One Piece buatan teaandtumblr. What would happen if everyone on Green Line really did speak different languages? A couple of little explorations done here and there. 2 days Sanji had been on the ship, and already a fight had broken out. He was busy cooking in the kitchen, but he could hear the squabbling clearly enough. It seemed to be an argument mainly between Luffy and Nami, but Usopp was getting wrought in every so often, which only seemed to annoy Luffy more. The cook was getting ready to separate them all when, "Oi, Sanji! Come out here!" Luffy's voice was deafening, Sanji rolling his eyes, drying his hands on his tea towel as he stepped out into the deck. "What's up, Luffy?" Sanji found himself with Luffy's shoe thrust in his face. "What is this?" Luffy demanded, shaking said shoe. Before Sanji could answer, Nami was shaking the captain. "I'm telling you, flip-flop is the sound it makes. It's not what it's called." "No, it is!" Luffy shouted back, pouting. "Everyone calls it that." "No, it's sandals," Nami stressed. "That's stupid. Nami, it's pronounced jandal." Usopp cut in, shaking when Nami rounded on him. "This?" Sanji asked in confusion, examining the shoe closely. "It's a tongue, isn't it?" "Ha!" Zoro suddenly cried, green white. "I told you!" "Oh, not fair!" Luffy whined, begrudgingly putting his shoe back on. "That makes it 2 against 1. So Zoro is the winner. It has to be a tongue now." Wait. Sanji stammered incredulously, jerking a thumb at Zoro. "This mosshead also calls it a tongue?"
Then I'm calling it what Nami said. You don't even know what she said.
Zoro yelled while Nami cheered, giving Luffy a wink. "Sorry, Luffy, but it looks like sandal wings." Luffy sulked, folding his arm and storming away, all the while grumbling. "Well, Ace and Sabo called them flip-flop too, so there!" No one knew who Ace or Sabo were, but still the argument was settled, for now. Needless to say, it would come out again, with each new crew member they gained. But then they had 4 new words: Chinellas, Smuggles, Slops, Deckers. And Nami declared the war over before it even began. And if flip-flop somehow end up becoming the most accepted word, well, no one really minded. "Everybody stop!" The Straw Hats all stopped mid-bickering, turning around to face Chopper with inquisitive looks. The poor reindeer had not long been on their crew. They had just plotted their route to Jaya, and he looked stressed out of his mind. "Chopper?" Robin asked delicately. "Is something wrong?" "They are wrong!" he cried, pointing at everyone else with a shaking hoof. "They are making my head hurt!" "We are?" Luffy and Zoro said, head cocking to the side. "We are not even being that loud," Usopp agreed. That they hadn't been, it was true. They had just been sharing ideas on what they thought lay ahead on the Grand Line, what kind of treasure they could hope to find, what paths would lead them to their goals. It had been an enthusiastic conversation, but they hadn't been screaming or fighting or anything of the sort. "Are we too loud for your reindeer's ears or something?" Sanji asked, earning an excited noise from Luffy, who then proceeded to jabber on about superhearing or something. "I think," Robin cut in, "he's more annoyed that you are speaking Eastern, a dialect I'm sure Chopper doesn't." The 5 East Blue residents froze, glancing between each other, and then at Chopper sheepishly. Sorry?" Nami offered. "I guess we are just not used to not speaking it." Her eyes flicked to Robin. "I take it you speak Eastern?" Robin smiled sourly. "A little, as well as several other languages. But I have picked up far more since joining this crew. You all speak it so fluently." "But I don't!" Chopper wailed. "And I don't understand what anyone is saying." Luffy laughed, crouching down and patting Chopper on the head. "Sorry, Chopper. I know it's hard. Grimes only speaks to me in Linean, and I used to hate that. Learning a language is hard." "You are good at Linian now? Chopper offered. I'm really not. Luffy chuckled, because no, he really wasn't. Zoro had picked up Linian, the language of all the seas, drawn from the name Greenland, in his bounty hunter travels. Nami had learned it from her cartography books. Usopp was self-taught after trying to be a pirate like his father, and Sanji had had it drilled into him by Death so they could handle all customers at the Baratie. The fact that he also spoke Northford had yet to come up, but Jaya would change all that. Not that they knew that. Luffy thought Luffy had only had sporadic visits from his grandfather and Shanks. His exposure to anything other than Eastern was severely limited. But for now, Luffy said, slapping his hand on his knees, if we all drop back into Eastern, just yell at us, okay? Chopper frowned. Well, only sometimes, perhaps, because you can't forget. Deal. Luffy grinned, shaking Chopper's hand. Oh, and Chopper? Yeah? You are my teacher crewmate now. Chopper wouldn't be able to translate the word for months, but the way Luffy said it had his eyes staring up at it anyway. He gave a tight nod. Yeah! Shabody was perhaps the cruddiest place they have ever seen. Since all paths to the New World converged there, people from all over the world converged there too. Languages got tossed back and forth like no man's business, and while the vendors and shopkeepers all spoke Linian, the pirates revelers didn't. Some spoke their native language purely because it was the only one they knew, others because it gave them comfort, and others again because they didn't want people overhearing their plans. The Straw Hats had long since adopted some bastardish version of Linian, bastardized because there were Eastern words randomly thrown in from time to time. Luffy was the worst offender, but he tried. It didn't help that Frankie's rough Water 7 accent was sometimes hard to understand, and that Book's wording was a little more outdated than the one currently used. Luffy had been seen nursing many a headache trying to wrap his head around certain conversation, and if Nami occasionally had to translate, no one criticized him for it, which was obviously why he decided to team up with Estes Kid and Trafalgar Law. Two people even harder to understand than the rest of them combined. Kid had a thick southern drawl and a low, rounded northward lip that had a little something that Robin knew meant his native language was different again. I will save you guys. I will clean up the mess outside so you don't have to worry. For someone like Luffy, those had been fighting words, and apparently Trafalgar Law had talked so too, marching out of the action house right alongside Luffy to face the Marines. Kid gave an unimpressed nod. I'm telling you to stay back. No, you stay back, Luffy snapped, cracking his knuckles. I will obliterate you if you tell me what to do again, Estacia. Low drawled, raising a hand and ready to battle. Yeah? Well, what's there? Both rifle captains paused, Kit tossing some Marines away with a flick of his hand, while Lau seized his grip on his sword. I'm sorry, what? Yeah, Luffy repeated, frowning. You said yeah at the end of my name, and you do it for Kit too. Is it a thing in your country? Lau stiffened before scoffing and turning away. None of your business. He threw up a room, severed a rather alarming amount of limbs from their bodies. We are hardly here to socialize. Surprisingly, this punk is right, Kit agreed. You guys are so weird, Luffy complained, stretching out a leg and plugging down a line of Navy officers. And you speak Linian wrong. Speak it with a Greenland accent, or no one can understand. Are you guys idiots? That did it. Kit at Law running on him. Kit's accent becoming so thick it was barely recognizable as Linian, while Law started venting in a whole different language altogether. Luffy stared at them both for a long moment before bursting out laughing. You know what? Never mind. I like you both. You are funny. Law tossed a still screaming head his way before taking his leave of the battle. Kid was right by his side, taking his own crew and beating a hasty retreat. Luffy shook his head with a smile. What funny guys! 2 years later, and Law brought a whole new dynamic to their ship. Luffy's Linian was much improved, what with having only Rayleigh to talk to for 2 years, and he was able to go two with the warlord far more easily now. Trafalgar still proved to be a complicated name, too hard to get the pronunciation just right, so Luffy had shortened it to terlalu and left it at that. Law hadn't minded too much, accepting the name change along with the reason. But it became readily apparent that Linian wasn't the first language on his sub. It had taken Nami a day or two to recognize his accent, a much stronger version of Sanji's, meaning his roots were in North Blue too. Law had recognized the same thing, and had coerced Sanji into speaking Northford, the cook doing so grudgingly at first before seemingly resigning himself and swapping back whenever Law addressed him. Speaking Northford was like riding a bike to Sanji, wobbly at first but quickly falling back into the rhythm. Law was far more talkative in Northford than in Linian, something that annoyed Luffy to no end. It didn't take long for Luffy to try and ban the two from talking, standing between them with an expression that was a cross between a scowl and a pout. "Is he always like this?" Law inquired. Sanji gave a huff of laughter. "Yeah, actually, but it is his ship. What he says goes." Luffy was tugging Law's arm before he could reply. "Stop it! No more secret languages!" Law coolly slid his arm free and tapped Luffy on the nose. "Don't think I haven't seen you speaking to Zoroya in Eastern. You two are worse than Black Lakia and I." "But Zoro is my crewmate," Luffy protested. "I can talk to him how I want. You can't help mine." "Ah, you!" Law snapped, pinching the bridge of his nose. Luffy's eyes widened when he saw Sanji also looking confused. "Oh, that's different one again, isn't it? What language is that? What language is that?" Law very much didn't answer, striding past Luffy and making for the library. He managed to hide in there for several hours before Luffy came back, Law muttering a groan. But to his surprise, the other captain actually looked serious, hands awkwardly twisting together in front of him as he spoke. "Something bad happened, didn't it?" Law frowned, closing his book. "In what way?" Luffy matched his frown. "I don't know, but you mutter away in that weird language when you are grumpy or sad or thinking too hard." "It's not a weird language," Law groaned. He made to stand, but Luffy pushed him down by the shoulder. "It's your language, isn't it?" Law didn't answer. "It's where you came from, right?" "Yes," he eventually grounded out. "It's Flavish." "I don't know what that is," Luffy admitted. Law thanks someone, anyone, for small miracles. "Then do me one thing, Straw Hat, yeah? Promise me you won't try and find out. You won't even ask Nicoya." Luffy looked particularly cornered. "But, promise?" "Fine," Luffy grumbled. "But you have to promise me something in return." Law folded his arms, one eyebrow arching up. "And? What am I promising you?" "To teach me some." Law went ghostly white. "Even it's just a word or two a day." Luffy's hand came to a curl over Law's. "I want to learn Toraro's language, so he won't be settled on." Law had to beat back something that was a little too close to a sob for his comfort, because he had heard those exact same words 13 years earlier, when Corazon pushed too hard and he had screamed at him in Flavish, when they had visited one hospital too many and Law had chanted "Enough! Enough!" over and over until he nearly blacked out from the lack of air, when he had woken up from nightmares of Flavius burning and could only cry out in his home language, distraught and beyond comfort. And in the end, Corazon has had enough, sitting him down one day and telling him they wouldn't move until Law taught him at least two phrases. The phrases Law had chosen had been less than appropriate, and Corazon hadn't been blind, had picked up on it straight away. But damn, if that had stopped him from using them. In fact, he had used them so often that Law had taught him basic Flavish just to get him to stop. It had been Corazon's plan all along, but by that point, Law didn't even care. It was nice to have someone to talk to. Of course, Corazon had then have to go die, but Law's eyes flicked over to Luffy, seeing in him so many of the characteristics Corazon had had, and Luffy blinked in confusion, Law tugging the younger captain's head over his eyes to hide the smile that crept into his face. This, he said by way of explanation. Huh. When Luffy repeated back, it was nothing but a butcher syllable that held only the barest of similarities. Still, it felt like home. The Rosa had been an entire disaster from the second they had met landfall. There had been too many oversights, too many things they hadn't been made aware of, simply too much going on. The Straw Hats were seemingly capable of handling themselves, something Lau would forever be grateful for, mostly because he had been in neck deep with the Flamingo and Admiral Fujitora at the time. He had fooled himself into thinking he could swim away from that, and had ended up full of it for his trouble. It was as he was dragged into the palace and chained up that he realized one of his biggest oversights. The Don Quixote family didn't speak Northward anymore. He had just assumed that, because they had spoken it when he was a child, that they still would. The Flamingo had only spoken Linean at warlord meetings, but here, on the Rosa, he had made the island his own, going so far as to adopt the native language. And Law didn't speak a word of Leslie, not one. He cursed his own foolishness as countless plans were discussed right in front of him, and he was none the wiser as to their meaning. Oh, sure, the Flamingo had spoken to him in Norfolk when he had wanted a response or a rise out of him, but any other time he could be spilling all their secrets, and Law would have nothing to show for it. He had never been happier or perhaps angrier, because he was here to die, and why hadn't they run? To see a straw hat in his life when he came bursting through that window. It would take them an agonizing amount of time to climb back to the top of the palace, but they had made it. Low drawing Kikoku and holding it out in front of him, eyes locked on the man he had once worshipped and aspired to be. D will stir up a storm again. He grinned at the way the flamingo's fan popped, because maybe he had never learned gracefully, but Corazon had spoken in the holy speech of Mary Joyce to himself when he thought Law was asleep. Law had taken meticulous notes in his head, but never dared to bring it up. In the years since, Law had wondered if that was partially why Corazon had chosen to become mood, slipping into holy speech too much of a habit to break, or accent too recognizable to those who knew. God knew Law had never been allowed to speak it. Corazon slapping a hand over his mouth, the one time he had attempted, and looking like the ground itself would swallow them. Although that was before Law had known it was the language of the celestial fucking dragons. The flamingo's grin turned a little more forced. Why, Law? It's like you are his ghost, coming back to haunt me. Maybe Law smart-mouthed his way into that next round of bullets. Maybe the flamingo would have done it regardless. But either way, he felt strangely satisfied. After all, he could still rattle the heavenly demon. That had to count for something. That was one thing the Straw Hats had always wondered, but never had the courage to ask when it came to their captain. It wasn't like the subject was taboo, but for some reason they all act like it was. It was, simply put, the fact that Luffy sometimes didn't use language that sounded like his own. Yes, it was Eastern, even occasionally Linean, but it was just so out of place. Hey Sanji, these muffin things are delectable. What? But Nami, aren't what supposed to be complimentary? Huh? So Captain, the rate of decay increases faster and faster. Oh, it's exponential. And then came Dressrosa, and they were introduced to Sabo. Suddenly, it all made sense. Sabo came from a noble family, had private tutors, and spoke a more refined vocabulary than Luffy and Ace and their bandit guardian. Honestly, that revelation had explained so much. But as Luffy and Ace rough talk had rubbed off on Sabo, so Sabos had inherently rubbed off on them. Even years later, Luffy was still using the words he had heard as a child. Robin smiled serenely as Sabo finished his story. While she had known him 2 years, He had never mentioned being Luffy's brother. Not that she had mentioned being Luffy's crewmate either, so fair was fair. What? Sabo asked, seeing her expression. Her eyes wrinkled up as her smile widened a little more. Nothing. I think I just understood Luffy a little more, though. Sabo flushed, eyes flicking back to where Luffy was sleeping, and he suddenly turned dead serious. I wasn't in time to save Ace, but I'm not going to lose him. I will make sure of that. Get in line. The comment came from Zoro, and instead of being offended, Sabo bowed his head. Of course. I suppose at this point you have known him longer than I have. He's very lucky. Zoro was pacified, leaning back on his hands and letting his gaze find Luffy. There was a fond smile toying with the corners of his lips. You know, Luffy still speaks like you. Sabo frowned. Speaks like me? Zoro waved a hand. Just some words here and there. I know he didn't learn them from us. I didn't teach him those words. Sabo spluttered. It was Ace. It was all Ace. The straw hats exchanged looks, bewildered for a moment before understanding. Usopp going bright red, while Frankie grinned boldly. Zoro and Robin found a middle ground, and Sabo almost immediately realized he had made a misinterpretation somewhere along the line, but they weren't about to let it go. Oh? So what was it? Esport out him? Frankie asked eagerly. Sabo waved his hand frantically in front of himself. Nothing, nothing. Fairly confusing. Zoro drawled sarcastically. If Luffy hasn't said, then I'm certainly not repeating any of it, Sabo declared, getting to his feet and tugging his head over his eyes. You guys are the worst. They all laughed, but gave him some slack. They also brought it up again later with Luffy, the captain scratching his head in thought before lighting up, words coming out rapid fire fast. 10 seconds later, Robin slapped a hand over his mouth, even as Nami was visibly firing up. Robin managed to talk the navigator down over Luffy's thermal protest because, as she said, they were the ones who had asked. Luffy helpfully tacked on that he knew the words were bad, hence why they had never been spoken before. Nami had finally excused him, but it had left them all a little knock of kilter. The non-verbal agreement was met. If Luffy ever got a partner, never ask for the sexy details. Never. After Dressrosa had come Zou, then Whole Cake Island, then Wano, where the crew was finally reunited for the first time in months. Wano was a mess, obliterated by Kaido and falling more day by day. The Straw Hats had had their time to celebrate Sanji's return, to nurse the cook's better body along with his shader emotion. Luffy had mostly been healed by the time the Sunny had dropped anchor, but that hadn't stopped Law from checking him over, despite Chopper's protest that he had already done it. Luffy had just laughed Chopper off and let the Sergeant fuss over him. Law had been intending to spend the night talking strategy, but Zoro had shut it down quickly enough by dragging Sanji across the kitchen and jerking a thumb at the calendar tacked to the mast. Sanji froze, fingers held just in front of his lips. I didn't. Zoro gestured. You got any meat in the freezer? Any? Sanji swallowed thickly before nodding. Yeah, I do. He then aimed a flaming kick at Luffy, sending him flying. You shithead! Luffy was bunching back into a seated position, even as Sanji was stomping over, fish clenched. How dare you let me forget your birthday? A couple of gasps. It's today, you idiot! And we are not going anywhere until we celebrate. Lau made a noise of protest. Oi, Black yeah, this isn't the time. My captain, might say, not yours. They might not have understood the words, but Sanji's tone was enough to have them all a little taken aback, as well as impressed. Luffy just blinked at him several times before bursting out laughing, touching his side as he rolled around on the ground. Sorry, I forgot. I was too busy thinking about samurais and... His gaze lived in what Sanji would almost believe to be shyness. And how happy I was to have my tooth back. Sanji very much didn't dig back a sniff. Damn it, you shitty piece of rubber. Luffy just continued to grin, Sanji's cheeks flushing. before beginning to prepare what could only be described as a banquet. Their one chemistry session was put on hold, but really, there couldn't have been a better reason for it. Even Lau came around in the end. His crew immersed in the festive feast alongside Luffy's. He sat himself at Luffy's side, the one time he was still. Luffy beaming at him, but not breaking the silence. Happy birthday. Luffy's head snapped over, eyes wide. That, that's his turn. How do you? I speak of it a little. You speak it a little. Luffy corrected, chuckling at Lau's frustrated face. He pacified the other captain by letting his head drop into Lau's shoulder and swapping back to Linen. But your pronunciation is good. A small victory then. Hey Tarao? Yes, Rohatia. Will you teach me how to say happy birthday in your language? One day. Luffy allowed his heart to swell at that because good. It meant Lau was sticking around, and that was very good indeed.